So what is a negativity bias? There's a lot of talk there's a lot of talk about negativity bias. And a negativity bias, did a little research before we started, and it's actually a cognitive bias. So it's how we think about something that results in unpleasant or adverse events having more impact on our feelings and psychology than positive ones. So the negativity bias causes bigger emotional responses to problematic situations compared to positive things of the same intensity or impact. The negativity bias has a significant impact on how we make decisions, how we act as a parent, as a partner, how we act at work or socially, and of course on our self-esteem. Now, the negativity bias really is something that's developed in our brains over time to keep us safe and secure. We expect that things might not work out so that we can protect ourselves from danger. So this negativity bias emerges from a desire to protect yourself from physical harm or emotional pain. It also evolves psychologically to help us avoid embarrassment. And particularly for people who live with ADHD, I think that this negativity bias develops over time to avoid more of those 1,000 paper cuts that so many people with ADHD live with. The ways in which we're told that we're not getting it right, or we're too much, or we don't measure up, or whatever it is. And so this kind of resembles part of our inner critic. But it's different because it does have this biological connection to society. Whereas the inner critic is really something that develops through experience and environment. The negativity bias has some environmental aspects, but it's also something that we have in terms of how we are cognitively wired to protect ourselves. So let's say that we all have this negativity bias. How are we going to shift to seeing the things about ourselves that actually feel a little bit more like deficits, from this deficit thinking model to an asset thinking model? And this means that we're going to shift from negativity to the power of a positive mindset. So if you're only focused on what isn't working, you're going to miss all the good things in your life, big and small. But when you make an effort to acknowledge the positives, you'll make more room for growth, for calm and resilience. Most importantly, a positive mindset does wonders for your self-esteem. Instead of thinking, I can't do this, you can flip it around and say, I don't know how to do this yet, but I'm going to try. So your loud, harsh inner critic can be a nuisance, but it also has grown through the years to try to help you avoid situations that feel dangerous, and not just physically dangerous, but emotionally dangerous. Situations where, you may be embarrassed, you could be humiliated, you could be teased, you could be bullied. You may have to do something that is really difficult for an ADHD brain, things that are time-centered tasks or different types of organization. So our job is to lower the volume on that inner critic, that negative self-talk, and reassure ourselves that we've got the resources that we need to figure things out. Now, I'm curious, for some of you, I still don't have any answers about what quote-unquote deficits related to ADHD seem to affect you the most. So if you can have some ideas, you could put them up. For some people that I work with, it's time management. For some people, it's feeling disorganized. For some people, it's trouble with writing or perfectionism. For some people, it's being easily overwhelmed. For some people, it's being triggered emotionally too quickly and blowing up. What are the things about your executive functioning challenges that really get to you? So for me, I struggle with time management And that really is a part of myself that I have a lot of trouble liking. I know I came by this naturally. I didn't have a parent who could teach me this. But at my age, too bad. You have to have learned it over time. And yet, it's not that I don't feel time. It's just that I want there to be more time than there ever is. And so I have trouble kind of estimating, well, how much time is it going to actually take to do something? And I usually underestimate how long it takes, and I overestimate my capacity to do something. And this just gets me in one brouhaha, which is one of my favorite words, one sort of bubbling trouble stews in and then another. Some people also struggle with emotional regulation. They get triggered very easily. This happens to me as somebody who lives with some RSD, that something can happen and I hold on to it and I kind of mull it over and I try to figure it out and I don't quite understand why. And I really need to sort of let it go. And I'm much better at letting things go. But when someone has hurt me or betrayed me, it's tough. And what happens is my sort of emotional dysregulation occurs because I go back to it and then I feel the pain. It's kind of like I keep ripping off the scab instead of just letting it scab and not touching it, letting it go away. And I don't know how much that's related to ADHD or just being me, but I do think that when I've talked to people in some of my anxiety groups about living with anxiety and ADHD, this seems to be a familiar theme. So we have 2 responses, and I want to thank you. Brenda says a fear of failure is something that that they don't like about having ADHD, and Kim says executive functioning skills. So these are all challenges in terms of our deficit thinking, like we are not going to succeed, or I'm not able to produce or perform the way I would like. And then it makes it harder to feel good about yourself when you're actually doing things. Lucy says, not being able to complete tasks, and then the times where I can't settle to anything. So not being able to complete a task, but also struggling to settle down and perform a task when you have the time. Excuse me. Little hiccups, how embarrassing. So how are we going to try to shift from our deficit model? So being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world means already that you start thinking about yourself from a deficit model, because you're not the same as other people. You don't necessarily think about things the way they do. You might struggle with things more than they do. Yesterday, I was invited to a potluck dinner, and I basically was not able to come early to help set up. And I called my person and I said, I'm not going to be able to come and help set up. And they said, that's okay. I don't expect you to be on time for things. And I basically was like, ouch. That is not true. I know how to be on time. I can be on time, and many times I am on time, and sometimes I'm not, which is part of the challenge of knowing me, right? The inconsistency of that. And that's, I think, part of the real struggle of living with ADHD, whether it's, your executive functioning skills or your perfectionism or fear of failure or imposter syndrome. It's that you are consistently inconsistent about some of the areas where you have executive functioning challenges, and you want to be consistent, and it's hard for you to do that. And I think a lot of people just don't understand. And I tried to explain to this person, like, I'm doing the best I can. I set my alarms. In this particular case, I don't think you need me to come help you set up, because you're actually, you've got it under control. I happen to know that someone else is coming and I could use the time. But it didn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. And here I am, giving this Facebook Live to all of you, and I'm sharing, that people say things to me that hurt also. And in those moments, all I can do is explain, which is what I did. I said, this is not a conscious choice that I make. This is an executive functioning skill deficit that I have, deficit model. I did say that because I knew that this person would not understand it if I talked about it in another way. And I was right. So, so the thing is, like, I don't want to think about myself as someone who has these deficits. I like to think about myself as someone who has challenges. And some of these challenges I come by naturally, and some of them are environmental. And I bet that's true for you. Challenges that you have that you come by naturally, and challenges that you might have that are environmental. Kim says, time management, lifelong classes pulled me out of my first grade lifelong. Time management, lifelong. Thank you. Classes pulled me out of my first grade classes. I am 62, so that was a few years ago. Also dyscalculia, so dual battle. Yes. So we want to try to first start by saying, instead of we have deficits or we're wrong or we have problems, that we actually have challenges. I think it's really important the language that we use to describe the things that we struggle with. That way, it's not that something's wrong with me, it's that I have a challenge in this area. Now, in the example I gave earlier, that person has a challenge too. And that person has challenges around needing things to be perfect and relying on others to help her make it that way. So, we all have our issues, and I'm not judging her, and I don't want to be judged myself either. So how are we going to shift to a positive mindset, a growth mindset? And I want really to think about this, to have you think about it as the power of a positive mindset, because a growth-oriented mindset, a positive mindset is powerful. The language that we use to talk about ourselves is powerful. When we talk about ourselves with negativity, with criticism, with shame, and we blame ourselves, we are actually weakening who we are, and nobody deserves that. So when you're focused on your efforting, instead of only your successes, it's easier to acknowledge the positives because you're in the process rather than only looking for the outcome. So a positive mindset really can help you shift from listening to what other people are saying and believing that, to waiting for reassurance from others to validate who we are. So we can overcome negative thinking by nurturing a growth mindset, one that encourages us to try things regardless of knowing how they're going to work out. So we pay attention to our strengths, we surround ourselves with people who believe in us, and we stay open to experimenting. Ultimately, we believe that we can bounce back from things, even if you have to regroup and start over. That's what a growth mindset is. I'm going to try something. I'm going to see what happens. If it works, cool. I'm going to do more of it. If it doesn't work, that's okay. I'm not a failure. I'm not a loser. I am actually learning. And so I'm going to circle back, maybe talk to someone, try to engage some people who can assist me, regroup, and try it a different way. That's what it means to live with a growth mindset. And growth mindsets are healthy. Fixed mindsets basically say we are who we are and we're not going to change. Whereas a growth mindset says I'm living, I'm learning, I'm open to different ways of doing things. I'm learning about myself, and that's okay. And I'm going to accept that. Am I going to give up on my time management challenges, my solutions? Absolutely not. I'm going to keep going because I'm getting better all the time. I'm much better than I used to be. So I'm proud of that. And when I get to places on time, pat myself on the back. If I'm, ready and my husband is not ready, I'll just say, you would like a little credit that I actually was ready and you weren't. And he says, okay, fine. But admit that is, what we have to do. We have to encourage ourselves. I actually organized my desk drawer. I did the laundry and I folded it and I put it away. I'm working on these skills. I'm doing them. Maybe not all the time, but more times than not. That's our goal, more times than not. When you overcome negative thinking and that negativity bias, you encourage yourself, okay, to try things regardless of knowing how they're going to work out. You pay attention to your strengths. You surround yourself with people who believe in you, and you stay open to experimenting. Ultimately, you believe you can bounce back from things, okay? And that's resilience, right? That's what resilience is about. So positivity begets self-confidence. It's as simple as that. With a growth mindset, you will set yourself up for success and recover faster from the setbacks. So make it a point to notice what's working well for you and build on that, one courageous step at a time. Some of the tools for growth mindsets. When we try something, we risk failure. When we avoid it, we ensure failure. So we want to foster a growth mindset that you can change over time with practice and effort by focusing on some of these steps. And I'll put some of them in here. So we're going to pay attention to what's working. Ask yourself, what's going right? What would I like to do more of? Rather than what isn't going right and what do I want to do less of? This shifts your whole perspective. Instead of what could go wrong or what am I doing wrong, it's what could I do that's right. And this changes, this kind of language changes how we think about ourselves and what we're doing. And so we want balance and to redirect our attention to potential positive consequences. It helps to think about stressful situations or tasks in advance and how you want to respond to them, but also what are the tools that you need to be successful in that situation. A lot of times we will go through something that's stressful and we'll think, oh, whew, so glad that's over. I'm sure, I hope and I bet it won't happen again. But it will. Things happen. And it's not that it might look the same, but the process of the stress could be the same. And so we want to have a method of dealing with the stress that isn't about what's wrong with us, what are we lacking, but is about what could I do that would work in this situation, and what have I done in the past in a similar situation that would assist me now. We want to, likewise, after a challenging activity or a situation, we want to plan for recovery. Maybe it's a short walk or listening to some tunes, watching some YouTube videos, TikTok, drawing, coloring, shooting some hoops, reading, playing music, talking to a friend, getting a massage, whatever it is that helps you recover from this big output of energy and reclaim, your sense of centeredness and yourself. That's really important. So, for example, I'm planning to go see my elderly parents over Thanksgiving, and my family is really intense and I love them, but I know that I need to come back on Saturday, so I have a full day to myself to kind of just shed the intensity and recover and go for a nice walk with my dog in the autumn leaves by the river or something that's going to feed my spirit so that I can arrive back in a more balanced place. We want to think about this process idea rather than the outcome. So when we're thinking about shifting from a negativity bias, what's wrong, what's not going to work out, how we're a failure or a loser, this is not helpful for us. This is about blame, and blame is not useful because it doesn't teach any skills. There's no blame when something doesn't work out. It's much more productive to talk about what happened, what you would have liked to have done differently, what lessons you might learn, and what next steps are possible. So instead of focusing on the failure aspects of a situation, we want to emphasize the normality of struggling and brainstorming other options. And usually this is helpful to do with someone else. Maybe it's a partner or a parent or a sibling or a good friend or a therapist or a coach. This is very helpful. When we say to ourselves, yes, you can. So I read an interesting book that talked about self-talk. And in this book, what it said is when you talk to yourself with a you, Sharon, rather than I, there's more power to it. That somehow your unconscious listens to it a little bit more than if you say I. And there's that little bit of distance helps you kind of really step back and zoom out a bit in a situation so you can make different choices. So if we can say to ourselves, yes, you can, we're starting the process of change, and we're starting the process of shifting from a deficit thinking model to a positive asset model. What can I do that's worked in the past that I could apply in this moment? Who might I talk to help me figure this out if I'm struggling? And can I say to myself, it's okay if you can't do this yet. It's okay if you can't do this yet. This is a process, you're learning. And this is what keeps the process of learning going. Our mindsets influence our mental chatter and vice versa. So what we say to ourselves makes a huge difference in our attitudes and in our behaviors. So we're shifting the habit of asking ourselves what's going to go wrong, what's not going to work out, why this is going to be a problem, to asking what could go right, what might be something positive that could occur or come out of this situation. Kim says, my husband and I are working on this as we both have ADHD, and some of our normal stabilizer foundation items are changing as we're dealing with aging changes. Yes, and when you're aging, there are challenges of things that you actually cannot do as well as you used to be able to do. I'm throwing in a free gift for you. It's a downloadable about shame. Because I think shame is part of that deficit thinking model, and we're shifting to something more to a growth mindset. So one of the things that clearly we're talking about today is self-acceptance. So accepting your ADHD is the first step toward empowering yourself. ADHD is not who you are. It's something that you live with. Your brain is wired differently from neurotypical folks, but it doesn't diminish you. It doesn't mean you're less than. And I think that when we think about deficits and we focus on our deficits, we live in a place of less than, and that's no place to live. We want to acknowledge our unique perspectives and our, fundamentally creative, idiosyncratic approaches to life so that we can better set ourselves up for success. You are an outside-the-box thinker. And as one of my clients once said to me when she was 10, and she's now, I think, probably a senior in high school, she said, who wants to be an inside-the-box thinker? That's not fun. All the fun is on the outside. I love that. Our goal is to have a deeper understanding of how our brains work and what assists us in living fully and what might be holding us back and what we can do to try to change those aspects of ourselves that we don't feel good about. So I have my time timer. I set alerts and alarms on my phone. And I set them now for 20 minutes and for 10 minutes before I have to leave for an event, so that I have a warning and then I have another warning, and at the 10-minute warning I can start to gather myself together and leave, so I can arrive on time. When you have a deeper understanding of what works for you and what doesn't work for you, you're able to use that knowledge to your benefit by setting up routines and daily practices that work for you, that encourage you to keep going with the changes and keep validating you as you shift and experiment. It's really important with ADHD, when you're getting out of the deficit model of thinking, to experiment. I'm going to try this and see how it works. It's okay if it doesn't. And if it doesn't, okay, that's cool. I'll see why and I'll do it again. Everybody has executive functioning strengths and challenges, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, right? We are all unique beings. People who have ADHD, and often people who are neurodivergent, have more intense executive functioning challenges that are more numerous than people who don't have ADHD. That doesn't mean that they're not valuable human beings. That doesn't mean that they're not worth loving, because you are, because we are, right? You may not be able to change the way your brain is wired, but you can make the most of the tools and the gifts you have to live well. So let's take a minute and put in the chat one way that you could shift from negative thinking, from that negativity bias, that deficit model, to a growth mindset, to a what is something, good that could happen, what could go right. So could you put in the chat an answer to that question? How can I shift to thinking what could go right, or what might I enjoy in a situation? What's a little thing that might help you make that pivot? We can't change the brains that we have, but we can make the most of the tools and the gifts that we have to live well. So embrace what you love about ADHD while shoring up your challenges as a natural part of being human. So shift from things not going well, and that's what's going to happen, predicting negativity, to being open to what could go right. That yes starts the process of change, and yet keeps it going, yet helps you acknowledge your assets. So I'd love for some of you to put in some of the assets that you see with having ADHD. What are some of them? I can think of several. Creativity, spontaneity, humor, intellectual insights, emotional insights, loyalty to friends, socializing. Some people with ADHD really enjoy socializing. So I want you, when you're done, if you're live here, you want to put in the chat, that's great. But if you're watching this video on the replay, when this is over, which will be very soon, make a list of your assets and put it up on your mirror in your bathroom. So that's what you see every day. What I like about myself is, what I'm good at is, these are things, what I want to do more of is. So what I like about, I'm going to put in the chat, what I like about myself is, what I want to do more of is, and I forget what the other one was. It's a problem with typing and talking at the same time. What I like about myself is, what I want to do more of, Oh, what is something I do well? Okay, so we put that in the chat. What I like about myself is, what I want to do more of is, what is something I do well? Brenda says, I have started to say out loud, stop it, when things go wrong, and I call myself damn dummy. Then change my wording. Oh, I love this. And you are not a dummy. You are not a dummy. You've just made a mistake. It's kind of like walking on a sidewalk and then you sort of trip on like a piece of cement that's sticking out or a little hole. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You've stumbled. That's okay. You're going to catch your balance and keep going. And yes, Kim says hyperfocus can be a gift, curiosity, creative problem solving. Andrea says being a multitasker. These are all great aspects of living with ADHD. And Kim says empathy. I love that. Well, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to kick off ADHD Awareness Month and the Empowerment Campaign at Attitude Magazine. Again, please check out my free downloadable on shame and how to overcome it. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you again next month.